This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a new season of Adventures in Compliance. This season, we're going to take up the second set of 12 short stories published in the Strand magazine in 1893 and 1894, which were collected in the book The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes was published in the United Kingdom by G. Loons and in the U.S. by Harper's and Brothers. It's the second collection featuring the consultative detective Sherlock Holmes. The Final Problem was published in this series, and that remains one of the top Sherlock Holmes stories of all time, as Doyle was determined to kill off Sherlock Holmes, his most famous character, due to not simply its popularity, but how Holmes in many ways had taken over the life of Doyle the writer. I hope you'll take this opportunity to not simply listen to this podcast series, but also to reread the stories in the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. In this episode, we take up the adventures of the Reigate Squires, which appeared in June 1893 in the Strand magazine. We're going to follow it with some ethical lessons, and I know you'll enjoy this episode of Adventures in Compliance. If you've enjoyed this series or enjoy Sherlock Holmes, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever great podcasts are listened to. Adventures in Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Even Holmes is prone to melancholia, and in this episode, Watson has the opportunity to recall some of his pre-Holmesian past. Exhausted after solving a case in France, Holmes is in need of a rest, which Watson declares would be best attained at the estate of a friend, Colonel Hayes. The colonel explains the good doctor was one of his patients during this time in Afghanistan, and a grateful one too. He offers the two men the run of his home down in the country greenery of Reigate, Surrey, but it swiftly transpires that there shall be no rest for the wicked, the weary, or for Sherlock Holmes. First, he learns of a burglary at a nearby estate where the thieves made off with some of the most mundane items they can find, including a ball of string. Then comes the news of murder. Yes, murder at another estate where a coachman is killed, and a torn piece of paper with a few words written on it is a potential clue. Holmes introduces himself to the investigating officer and learns that his reputation has preceded him, and he promptly spots something that the police had missed. The words in the paper are from two different writers, as though two people took turns writing one word each. An expert of handwriting, Holmes is able to deduce the sex and age of the two writers, and even that they are related to each other. These insights lead him to interview the Cunninghams, the elderly father and youthful son who currently reside at the estate. The son immediately explains how the coachman had disturbed a burglar, pursued him, and been shot dead for his troubles. The father merely says he was in his room smoking at the time and missed the entire commotion. But Holmes knows they are both lying. No footprints lead to the site of the killing, and a burglar would never enter a house where the inhabitants are clearly awake. The body showed no signs of being shot at close range. What of the mysterious piece of paper? Holmes ascertains that the handwriting on the note was that of the two Cunningham men and sets about searching their rooms. At this point, they ambush him, intent on preventing him fulfilling his plan. But they are too late, as Watson and the police rush to the sound of the melee. Holmes declares both men are murderers and produces the evidence, the remainder of the torn sheet of paper. Furthermore, an examination of Alex the son's guns proves it was indeed the murder weapon. But why? It was because the Cunninghams had committed the earlier burglary, hoping to unearth legal papers that might assist him in a property dispute they were engaged with the owners of the estate. They did not find it, but the coachman knew of their activities and set about blackmailing them into silence. And indeed, he was silenced, and the Cunninghams swung for their crime. So what are some of the ethical lessons learned from the adventure of the Reigate Squire? Well, the information in this case is interesting and certainly worthy of Holmes. Truth and justice. Sherlock Holmes always seeks the truth regardless of the status or influence of the individual involved. He does not allow personal biases to interfere with his investigation, and he teaches us the importance of impartiality and fairness in our actions and decisions. Obviously, a key lesson for every compliance professional. Another key lesson is honesty and integrity. Holmes operates with a strong sense of integrity. Even when his health is at stake and he's on a period of extended rest, he cannot resist helping in a case that needs his expertise. This story underlines the importance of honesty, integrity, and standing up for what's right, even when it's inconvenient. What about the value of knowledge, intelligence, and insatiable curiosity? In many ways, Holmes' skill lies not in his physical strength, but his intelligence, knowledge, observational ability, and insatiable curiosity. This is as important for every compliance practitioner as any other skill. And it underlines the importance of intellectual abilities and the continuing lifelong learning that every compliance professional needs to have in place. Accountability. Here, the criminals were held accountable for their action, reinforcing the ethical principle that every action has consequence. And indeed, the recent 2023 evaluation of corporate compliance programs changed the name of penalties or sanctions for individual employees who violate the FCPA to consequence management. So there are consequences to every action, particularly those that are unethical or illegal. And finally, benevolence. Holmes often assists in cases without expectation of a reward. This altruism is a powerful ethical stance demonstrating a sense of duty and willingness to help others simply because it's the right thing to do. I've monikered myself as the compliance evangelist because I believe in the worldwide fight against the international scourge of corruption. If you've enjoyed this episode, I hope you'll subscribe, rate, and review to Adventures in Compliance, wherever great podcasts are listened to, or perhaps even on YouTube. I also hope that you will take this opportunity to reread some of the great Conan Doyle short stories found in the collected works, the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. If you'd like to take a deep dive into a particular short story, I'd love to visit with you. So please give me a shout at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Adventures in Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. I hope you'll join us again next week where we take up the adventure of the Gloria Scott. This is Tom Fox. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Adventures in Compliance.